1918. A basement in a merchant house in the Ural mountain region. The Tsar, the empress, 5 children, 11 people went down those stairs that night. None came back up. Then the men with shovels tried to make them vanish. For 70 years, the Soviet government denied where the grave was. The location was lost. The matter was closed. A young woman in the capital of Germany spent 6 decades insisting she had escaped. Millions believed her. Books were written. Films were made. DNA says otherwise. What modern forensics finally revealed was stranger than any escape story. The truth had been hiding under a roadside the entire time, and some of the remains are still not buried. The story begins not with violence, but with a family on a slow train ride east. By the spring of the year before, the Russian Empire had collapsed. The last Tsar of Russia had given up his throne. His wife, his 4 daughters, and his young son were prisoners of the new government. The boy was the heir to the throne. He was 13 years old. The family was moved from a palace, then from a country house, then loaded onto a train heading deeper into the country. Their final destination was a city deep in the mountains east of Moscow. A wealthy merchant's home in the city had been emptied for them. The windows were whitewashed so that nothing inside could be seen from the street. The doors were guarded. The family was told the move was temporary. The youngest daughter was 17 years old. She had grown up in a palace by the sea outside the imperial capital. She had 4 sisters and a younger brother. She liked to climb trees. She liked to sketch. She had brought her camera with her. Her name appears in her sister's diaries on almost every page. The boy was sick. He had a blood disorder passed down from his great-grandmother. A simple fall could become deadly. He had been carried in the arms of sailors for most of his short life. His mother had brought every prayer book she owned. The older sisters had brought their cameras and their diaries. They wrote in those diaries every day until the last week. Outside the merchant's house, the country was tearing itself apart. A civil war was beginning. An army loyal to the old order was advancing on the city from the east. The new government in the capital knew the danger. If that army arrived first, the family inside the merchant's house could become a symbol, a rallying point, a reason for the war to continue. The new government could not allow that. The order to act came down on the night of the 16th of the 7th month. The family was woken after midnight. They were told there was unrest in the city. They had to be moved to a safer place. For their own protection, they would wait in the cellar. 11 people walked down a narrow staircase into a small room with whitewashed walls. The empress asked for chairs. 2 were brought in. The young heir was carried in by his father because he was too weak to walk on his own. The 4 daughters stood together against the back wall. With them stood the family doctor, the maid, the cook, and the valet. A squad of armed men entered the room behind them. A short statement was read aloud. Then the room filled with smoke and noise. When it was over, the men spent the rest of that night and the next day trying to make the remains disappear. They drove them out of the city in the dark. They went to an abandoned mine shaft in a forest a few kilometers north. They poured acid on the faces. They tried to set fire to the clothing. They split the group. 2 of the youngest, the heir and one of his sisters, were taken aside and buried in a separate small pit. The other 9 were dumped under a road in a forest clearing not far away. The next morning, the men returned to the city and burned their own clothing in the courtyard of the merchant's house. The official story began that same week. Only the Tsar had been struck down, the new government announced. The wife and children had been moved to a safe location. They were being protected. They were alive. Inquiries from foreign governments were brushed aside. When the army, loyal to the old order, finally took the city a week later, they searched the merchant's house. They found bullet holes in the cellar wall. They found burned clothing in the courtyard. They found a single severed finger in the mine shaft north of the city. They never found the family. For 70 years, that was the end of the official story. The new government built its country on that silence. Schoolbooks across the Union did not name the place. Maps did not mark the forest clearing. The old merchant's house in the mountain city was eventually demolished by order of a future leader. He did not want it to become a place of pilgrimage. The road through the forest clearing was paved over. Across the rest of the continent, rumors filled the silence the government had left behind. The youngest daughter had escaped. A kind soldier had saved her. She was living in the south of the continent. She was living in the west. She was living in a hospital in the capital of Germany. In 1920, a woman was pulled from a canal in that capital. She refused to give her name. She would not speak for weeks. She was placed in an asylum. Slowly, in fragments, she began to tell a story. She said she was the youngest daughter of the murdered Tsar. She said a kind soldier had carried her from the basement. She said she had crossed half the continent on foot. She gave interviews. She gave depositions. She convinced surviving members of the old royal family she was telling the truth. She knew details about the imperial palaces. She knew nicknames. She knew the names of pet dogs. She wrote books. She moved across the ocean. She married a professor of history. She lived a long life and died in 1984, still insisting she was the lost princess. The legend outlived the men who hid the family. It outlived the country that had killed them. But 60 kilometers from the merchant's house, in a forest no one was supposed to visit, 3 private citizens had been quietly looking for a roadside grave. They had been looking since the late 1970s. They were not historians. One was a filmmaker. One was a geologist. They had read an old confession written by one of the men who had been in the cellar that night. The confession described, in detail, where the remains had been hidden. The men found the spot under the road in 1979. They opened the ground. They lifted 9 skulls out of the mud. They put them back. They told no one. They could not safely tell anyone in the country they lived in. It was not until the Soviet government itself collapsed that the grave was opened officially. In 1991, in a forest clearing about a half-hour's drive from the city, archaeologists opened the shallow pit under a roadbed. They lifted 9 sets of remains out of the mud. The bones had been doused in acid. Faces had been crushed, but the bones were there. 2 were missing. The heir to the throne, one of his sisters. That was the gap that kept the legend alive. What followed was one of the most important forensic DNA investigations of the entire century. A laboratory in southern England led the first round of work. The samples were small. The acid had eaten through bone surfaces. The fires had burned away soft tissue. But deep inside the densest part of the bone, in the chambers of the inner ear, the genetic material had survived. Mitochondrial DNA was extracted from those samples. Mitochondrial DNA is passed only from mother to child. It is more stable than other forms of genetic material. It survives in old bone when nothing else does. The maternal line of the murdered empress led to a living royal relative across the continent. He was the husband of a reigning queen. He provided a small blood sample. His maternal grandmother and the murdered empress had shared a grandmother. The sequences matched at every position. The empress was identified. Her 3 daughters in the grave were identified. The Tsar was identified through a different maternal line, traced to 2 living cousins, and confirmed years later by exhuming his own brother from a different cathedral. The bones in the roadside grave were the imperial family. Modern forensics had proven, item by item, what one country had denied for 70 years, but 2 children were still missing. In a hospital in the eastern part of one of the southern states, a tissue sample sat in storage. The woman who had pulled herself out of a canal in 1920 had needed a surgery near the end of her life. A small portion of her tissue had been preserved. 5 years after her death, a laboratory extracted her mitochondrial DNA from that preserved sample. They compared it to the empress and to the living royal cousin. It did not match, not at any position. They then compared it to a different family entirely. A Polish factory worker had disappeared from the German capital in the early 1920s. The factory worker had a grandnephew. They obtained a small sample from him. The fit was not approximate. It was item by item. The woman in the canal had been a missing factory worker with a mental break. The legend that had lasted 6 decades was built on a stranger. She had walked into a fairy tale at the right moment, and she had found a small circle of survivors of the old royal house who had wanted to believe. What emerged was not the story the world had wanted. It was something else entirely. DNA says otherwise. The phrase was no longer just about a roadside grave. It was now about a 60-year deception that had crossed an ocean and convinced a continent. In 2007, an amateur search team found a second small pit in the forest. 70 meters from the first grave, under burned charcoal and broken pottery, were the fragments of 2 more young people, a boy of about 13, a young woman in her late teens. 3 reveals followed, each one closing a door that the cover-up had left open. The first reveal. DNA from the new fragments matched the empress and the Tsar at every position. The fragments were tiny, a piece of a jawbone, a finger bone, a burned section of skull. But they were enough. They were 2 of the missing children, the heir to the throne, and one of his sisters. The second reveal. The sister in the second pit was not the one the legend had claimed. The legendary lost princess had been in the first grave the entire time. She had never escaped. She had never lived in any foreign city. She had not lived anywhere after that night. She had been with her family in the basement at the age of 17. The story that an entire continent had told for a century was wrong. The third reveal. New testing using millions of genetic markers identified, with a probability of 1 in a septillion, that the man in the roadside grave was the last Tsar. A septillion is a number followed by 24 zeros. It is more than the number of grains of sand on the planet. The certainty was no longer scientific. It was final. What was suppressed for 70 years was finally being told. The remains in the roadside grave were the family that had been declared still alive in a basement more than a century ago. What does any of this change? It changes the map of one of the most powerful cover-ups of the entire century. A government denied a location for 70 years. A continent invented a princess to fill the silence. A single factory worker convinced a small circle of surviving royalty she was someone she was not. She did it through nothing more than the certainty in her own voice. It also changes what we know about what science can do with damaged bone. The work on these remains, more than almost any other case, taught forensic laboratories how to extract DNA from material that should have given up nothing. The bones in that grave had been doused in acid. They had been set on fire. They had spent 7 decades in mud. They should not have spoken. The methods refined on these bones are used today to identify soldiers missing from wars a century old. They are used to identify victims of disasters and floods. They are used to bring names back to bodies pulled from the rubble of collapsed buildings. They are used in unsolved cases that have been cold for decades. Each one of those cases owes something to a forest clearing in the Ural Mountains, and to the patience of a few private citizens who refused to forget where the bodies were buried. But the cover-up is not entirely over. The bones of the heir to the throne and his sister are still not buried. 44 small fragments sit in a state archive. The remains of the rest of the family were given a state funeral in 1998 and laid to rest in a cathedral in the imperial capital. But the 2 children from the second pit were never joined to them. The Russian Orthodox Church, which canonized the family as saints in the year 2000, has refused for nearly 2 decades to formally recognize the remains as authentic. A funeral planned for 2015 was cancelled at the last moment by the church, which asked for further study. That study has not concluded. The fragments remain in the archive. More than 100 years after the night in the basement, the family is not yet fully buried. The truth is now told. The grave is now known. But the smallest victims of one of the most powerful cover-ups of the entire century are still waiting for their funeral. A young woman, 17 years old, in a white dress, sitting on a chair in a basement that is about to fill with smoke. For a century, a version of her was said to be wandering across a continent. For a century, books were written, films were made, and a stranger was paid the respect owed to a princess. She never escaped. She never wrote a book. She never spoke another word after that night. DNA says otherwise. What ended in that basement was a dynasty. What remained is what the bones were finally allowed to say. The story is still being rewritten. The last 2 children are still waiting to be buried. The cover-up is not yet complete history. Discovery continues. Thanks for watching. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and turn on notifications. We cover forensic mysteries, ancient evidence, and the cases history tried to forget.